Welcome to the Hazard Class Podcast. This is the podcast where I ask my stupid questions to some of the smartest people in and around the world of emergency services. My guest this week is one of the owners and founders of the Hazmat Guys. He's a retired member of the FDNY's Hazmat One. He's one of the top hazardous materials instructors in the world. And while he is one of the world's worst spellers, he is truly one of the most kind and caring guys I've ever met. Oh yeah, he's pretty smart too. This week we're going to chat with Mike Monaco.
Hey everybody, what's going on? He is absolutely right. I cannot spell for the life of me.
But it is a joy to watch the spelling sometimes. And you say, how the heck did you get there? But it is one of the most endearing things about it. I think I love it.
My friends always, they called it Mike Ease. And they're like, it takes a good 6 months to learn Mike Ease. But once you got it, like it makes sense.
Yeah, you just look at it and go, okay. Imagine I didn't know how English worked, and then you kind of work through that, and you really work through the phonetics. You can figure out what it means. But we were just saying before we started, the whole thing of this show was always, well, I want to get to know the person behind the instructor. I want to get to know who is this actual person that I've maybe have seen in some way, shape, or form, but I don't actually know who they are or why they are. And then it hit me that I hadn't done that with you and Bobby, so I was like, let's do it. It seemed fun. So with that, though, we can't do this, and you know this, and we love this. We can't do this without talking about a stupid question. So we're going to spin the wheel of stupid questions. Just a reminder that asking questions is good. If you point it at the right people, you can still get some pretty smart answers. So with that, we'll get into it. Okay. So, full disclosure, I'm not going to spin the wheel, even though I just said I was going to because I'm a liar. But okay. I was talking to my wife earlier today, and we had something come up, and she said, you can't ask that. And I said, well, that's a very good reason why I should. Because I know Mike will be willing to talk about this more than likely. And if not, we'll edit it out. But I think you will.
Okay.
So we had this debate in the car, me and my wife, and she is blown away by this. That some people stand up to wipe their butts after they poop.
Right.
And there's a big debate about whether standing or sitting is an appropriate thing to do.
I don't really understand how there's a debate on this. Because okay, go ahead, finish. Because I already have thoughts forming in my head.
And the question is not really a question. It is, do you think that both are valid, or is there a truly correct answer?
No, there's only one proper way to wipe your ass. Hands down, without a shadow of that. And it's listen, okay, all right. There's different people out there, right? I happen to have a German ass, meaning like I don't just have a hole and thighs, like I've got an ass cheek. So from a logistics point of view, if I were to try to drop a deuce, and now let's assume that, like many guys, it's often quite a bit of wiping. If I were to try to stand up and the entrance were to seal, and then I were to try to wipe the remains out of the entrance hole or exit hole, depending on how you want to look at it. Depending on how you want to look at that, you would the pressure would keep the cheeks together from standing, and therefore, as you wiped, the cheeks coming together, you would end up just smearing everything as you were coming out of the crack. So now if you are like an Ethiopian and you have nothing on you, maybe your hole is just exposed to the air and you can just wipe freely away and nothing is going to happen. God bless you. All the more power. But anyone with actual butt cheeks has to sit down when they wipe.
Okay. And I think that you are probably correct. That said, I went through a phase of my life where I was a stander, and I've since been converted.
Really?
I did. And I blame it on the idea that I don't think I was ever taught anything different. I think that I was just winging it.
I mean, I don't actually remember potty training, but I can imagine that those first couple wipes, having kids, I would never want them to stand and wipe them. That seems like it would be utter chaos. Like those, they're just all moving around and wiggly, and you're trying to wipe, and they're turning around to ask you a question, and now there's a smear that goes, halfway in a spiral around their body while you're trying. Sit, wipe, done. That's what went through your mind the first?
Well, here's the thing and I think I might be perpetuating this problem because as I was talking to my wife, I told her, well, I think I learned because when like our kids like went to the bathroom, they would stand up and I would wipe. And then I went, oh no, I'm like perpetuating this problem. Maybe that's the origin story for me. And I don't know. I'd have to ask my parents, I suppose, but that's 30 years ago. But
you didn't find it easier to decon the area fully opened while sitting?
I think I felt hand in the toilet bowl was pushing it.
Oh no, you have them lean over a little bit, and then the angle to the no.
Yeah, well, live and learn. I've since been converted, thank God. Okay. But yeah, well, I'm happy you're on team sit, but this might spur some more conversations.
I got to turn the tables. This interview just switched.
Okay, I like it.
So you were a stander for how long? How many years did you stand?
More years than I'd like to admit. Probably, I bet you I'm a 10-year stander.
Okay, all right. So you're the perfect then to ask these questions to.
Okay.
The first time you sat and wiped, what was your experience versus standing and wiping? Because I've never stood and wiped. So everything I'm talking about is theory. So you've actually lived in both realities. Which reality do you prefer?
At this point, I think I feel so much shame if I were to go and stand because I've been so shamed by the culture that I don't know.
You're not a woman. Take emotion out of it. Okay. All right. This is a logic question. Okay. This is a what works better. What is a more efficient way of wiping? What is a cleaner way of wiping? What way, if there was nobody else left on this earth, the population is gone. It's just you. You sit down in some empty vacant mall with vines growing all over the place and woodland animals have now taken over that mall. Okay. You have the opportunity to go to the bathroom. You wipe. Are you standing or sitting?
I think I'm standing.
What?
I think I am.
Okay, well, I need to understand because the logic doesn't make sense.
Okay. I'm a person that's often sore in my body. And I think that like mechanically it's less sore than for me to lean. I don't know. Maybe that's not, I don't know. I think it's just like, it feels natural to be like, I did this, now I stand up, but I don't, for the record, but because of cultural shame. And I think that's the real problem.
Well, I that is a problem. You should never do something for cultural shame in any way, shape, or form. So would that put you out as a bidet user?
We have a bidet. Question. We have a bidet, which is one of the reasons that spawned this discussion earlier with me and my wife, because she says, how come you don't use the bidet? And I said, I do sometimes, but I forget that it's there. And she said, how do you forget that it's there? And I was like, I don't know. I just don't think about it. And so, but we do have one and I don't mind it. It is bizarre at first. It kind of took, I feel like a Frenchman when I first started doing it, but I didn't know how I felt about that. But, but even after you bidet, you still have to make a stand or sit decision.
That is true. That is true. But I think I would be more comfortable with a vertical wipe, as you would, after a bidet, because there's not any mess left over. All you're doing is drying.
So then you're fine with a vertical dry. You just don't want a vertical clean.
Correct. Okay. Because I mean, think about it, right? You get out of the shower. I don't sit down to dry my ass. Not that I'm shoving the towel, halfway up there, but
that
logically it makes sense.
I think that makes sense. All right. Well, now maybe I'll start using the bidet so that I can justify vertical drying.
There you go. Now you get the best of both worlds. You are comfortable with who you are as a freak stand-up wiper, and everybody's happy.
And, it's really like a rub, squirt, rub situation.
It is. It's the dry, or well, it's not really a dry decon. It would be the hybrid.
It's a hybrid.
Get some Dahlgren in there.
Rub,
and
squirt, rub. Yeah.
Rub, squirt, rub.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my wife questioned if we would talk about this on the podcast, if we'd be willing to. And I'm proud to say that we've now spent almost 10 minutes talking about it, which is very good.
So we don't have to edit.
No edits. Okay. 0 edits.
All right. Good,
We're going to do it live. All right. So let's actually talk about what you came here to talk about, which is your origin story, right? So bring me to little Mikey Monaco. Where are you from? What do your parents do? What's childhood like?
Ooh, okay. So I was born in a few miles south of Cut and Shoot, Texas, a place known as Tomball. So I'm actually a Texas-raised boy. Up until about the age of 8, we moved back to New York to be able to be around more family. Genetically, I'm mostly German, but culturally, I was raised Italian because of my father's side. So we had that kind of decent-sized Italian family as extended family that we grew up with. My father's a builder. My mother's a ballet dancer. I spent a tremendous amount of time in ballet studios as a kid. Wow. And just kind of had that whole experience. Actually, I can honestly say that I've been on stage with Baryshnikov and danced with the guy from Dirty Dancing. I don't remember. I don't know what his name is. I'm horrible with names and faces.
Kevin Bacon?
No, it wasn't Kevin Bacon. No, that's not Dirty Dancing.
Oh. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. He's a famous person. I just can't remember who the hell he is.
So wait, you're ballet trained?
I'm not ballet trained. I grew up around ballet. I was in some ballet classes because my mom didn't want to really pay for babysitting. Okay. So, it was kind of like, hey, come. I have spent many, many hours in a ballet studio because my mother was, she was a primary ballet dancer with American Ballet Theater. And then, which is where I get my body shape from. That's a joke for anybody who's not, watching my fat ass sit in front of this camera.
I've always thought, man, Mike looks like a ballet dancer.
It's a natural thought process when you first meet me.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
So yes, but I did get all of her flexibility up until I hit about age 40. I was easily able to do a front kick 9 inches above my head.
Wow. That's crazy.
So that's kind of my background. We moved up to New York when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and lived in a few various places on Long Island since, and I live on Long Island now.
How were you in school?
Horrible.
Okay.
Horrible.
Why?
Well, so because I am severely dyslexic, massively attention deficit disorder. And I guess my wife would say that I am, what do they call it? It is defiance disorder.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not something defiance disorder. I don't know. She's a psych nurse, so she knows all these things. So no, school was horrific for me. I hated every second of it. I could not learn. I was horrible at reading. The only thing that I was good at was math and science. And they just came natural. I didn't have to read. I didn't have to do any work. I'm extraordinarily lazy. So I don't want to put any effort into something that I already hate. Massively ADD. So if you get me hooked on something, if I'm hooked, that hyper attentive, thing.
Yes.
So you get me hooked on that, I will learn everything about it. Perfect example. I have been teaching myself how to do upholstery work. And I currently have an upholstery sewing machine down in my basement so I can refabricate boats.
Wow. Look at you. That's hyperfixation at its finest right there.
Hyperfixation at its finest, yes.
So school was a struggle. I assume, obviously you graduated, so you had good enough grades to at least do that.
I did. But through not with any help from the public school system. Mm-hmm. When I was in 6th grade, my mother was pretty much told that I would graduate not being able to read and write. And they were okay with that because they were going to, I was special ed all the way. and they did this thing where if you couldn't read and write, and they had like an excuse not to push you to read and write. They were just like, okay, we'll just read the tests to him. So I had tests read to me. I didn't have to learn to read and write because they did all the work for me. So when you can't read and you don't really want to read and you don't have any desire to read, then you turn out not to read. So yeah, had I stayed in public school, I would have not been able to read and write properly by the time I graduated. My mother, being the staunch German that she was like, that is not acceptable. She pulled me out. We converted to Catholicism, and I went to Catholic school.
You converted to Catholicism just for the schooling?
Yeah, yeah. We were Lutheran, and
Okay.
we got a discount for being Catholic. So all of a sudden, we're now Catholic.
Very Catholic, of course.
It's a very Catholic thing to do.
So did you go to college right away then after high school?
I did. I went to college right away. By the time I graduated high school, although I almost failed everything but math and science, and to highlight that difference when we were in the 90s, I know that was probably before you, but in the 90s when you took an SAT, the 1600 was a perfect score. I ended up with a 1340, and I had a 740 in my math score, which is really close to 100% score, and the rest was English. So I completely bombed my English scores, but I did really, really well in the math, and I was able to get into the University of Stony Brook. From there, I studied 1 year of chemistry, and then I switched over to physics. I did about 3 years worth of physics, and shortly, or in that time, 9/11 happened. And I was already a volunteer firefighter locally. And when I was a volunteer, one of my absolute, mentors, a person that I adore even to this day, Tony Tricarico, was retired as a captain of 252 in the New York City Fire Department, pulled me off to the side and was like, "Hey, Mike, like, I know you're going to college and you're doing all these things." He goes, "But do me a favor, take this test. You might like being a firefighter." And then he brought me into work a couple times, and that's it. I was hooked. So I took the test. 9/11 happened. I realized that, oh crap, I'm going to get called for the fire department really soon. And one of the deals that I had with my father was I had to graduate college. Like, that was just his thing. I had to graduate college. So I looked at the physics that was left in front of me, and the physics is a very difficult program. And I was not great at physics. I enjoyed it, but I was by no means like a savant or gifted in it. So I struggled, and I was only able to do 1 or 2 physics classes a semester. I turned around, I looked at the biology. The biology I could easily do like 5 classes a semester. So I switched to biology, and I graduated a couple years after getting on the job of New York City. Once I got off probation, I went back to school I did like 21 credits a semester. I banged out the rest of my college. I satisfied my father, made sure that he was happy, and I ended up with some degree in neurophysiology that
Wow.
I never used because I just, never even went to my graduation really, and I just kind of went back to the firehouse and forgot all about school until somebody called up and they were like, "Hey, we hear you have a science degree on the job," and I'm like, "Yeah." Talking with them a while, they're like, would you be interested in coming to Hazmat? And I'm like, 2 years on the job. I'm like, yeah, one day, like maybe one day in the future, I'll do it. And I got voluntold to go to Hazmat.
Hmm. So where were you working prior to Hazmat One?
Engine 233, ladder 176 in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Assigned to engine 233. We don't get assigned to both companies. But the house was on Rockaway.
Okay. So I want to go back a little bit there. So talk to me about why you started working for the volunteer fire company.
So in ninth grade, I had met a girl. We went out throughout all of high school, and her mother was part of the Setauket Fire Department, and very involved in the Setauket Fire Department. And being over there a lot, we ended up kind of going and doing fire department functions all the time. And that sort of got me intrigued and involved. And I found out Mount Sinai had a juniors program, so I joined their juniors program. And when I turned 18, I flipped right over into the actual being a full-time for, full-fledged firefighter.
What do you remember about that early on? Like you got into it under kind of a maybe strange circumstances. You're with this girl, it's her mom, and you're like, I think I'll try being a firefighter. And then now you're doing it. Do you remember like liking it a lot early on? Do you remember what do you remember feeling about it early on?
I remember loving it, absolutely loving it. My first job was with the volunteers, and it was a two-story colonial. Completely lost the house. It was a giant two-story colonial that was near the water, so it was a big house. It was a basement fire, and I can remember going down into the basement I was the backup with the nozzle man and the officer, and just such a rush of adrenaline, right? I mean, you're a firefighter, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Anybody who's listening to this that's not a firefighter, there is beyond a euphoric feeling that you have when you're there and you feel the heat and the smoke, and you don't know where you are. Like if you've never been in a fire, you open up your eyes, it's pitch black. You keep your eyes open or closed, it really doesn't matter, especially in a basement fire. And just hearing the crackles around, not being able to find the fire, feeling the heat, knowing that we were in a position that very few other people are, making it out okay, going back in, like the whole thing was just such for my brain, it was the perfect balance of chaos, danger, and adrenaline. And it just all came together to this perfect heroin mixture that just flowed through my veins.
For sure. I know that feeling for sure. So at that point, you're hooked. Now you go through the process, you get on FDNY. Actually, let's go. You know, it's interesting. I think you're being a firefighter for FDNY, but coming on after 9/11. What was your 9/11 experience being a volunteer kind of in the New York area, but not actually on FDNY?
It was only weird looking back on it. It wasn't weird in the moment. I was part of the Northern Brookhaven Tactical Rescue Team, which got called to 9/11 after the second towers collapsed. And I can remember, again, Tony Tricarico, we're packing up the rig, we're getting everything ready, and he pulled everybody off to the side, and he's like, listen, he's like, full disclosure, I can't imagine the stuff we're going to be breathing in for the next few days is good for us. It's probably going to take years off of your life. Like, you guys should know that before you go in. And that was the first, like, type of moment. Like, that's a little weird. And then we responded in. It was there for about a week. Then, they kind of went through these periods where they kicked everybody out, and then they brought everybody in, and then they kicked them out, and then we were digging on the pile. And it didn't feel like there was a big disconnect between like, oh, I'm with the New York City Fire Department or I'm a volunteer coming in, because there were so many people that were gathered there to help that it never felt like this was just an FDNY event. Like I was a guest at this thing that had happened to somebody else. It very much felt like this had happened to me just as much as it happened to the person in front of me. And we were all just doing the same thing. We were either taking small pieces of rubble and putting them in buckets, or we were on the line taking the buckets and kind of passing them out and just looking and searching. And I can remember the officer that I was with was a volley officer, and one of the New York City firefighters, turned to him and said, "Hey Lou, what do you want to do?" Like, very clear that it wasn't a lieutenant from New York City, but it didn't matter. He was a boss, he was there, and people just kind of naturally created this NIMS structure without officially being told. Like, it's just something that happened, and it all felt very together. There was never this feeling that like I'm not here because I'm not FDNY. And I think a lot of people felt that way. And that goes, we're fire department, we think fire department, but you know, there were so many rescue workers down there. You had your steel workers, you had your excavators, you had lots of different trades that were there, and we all were kind of on the same page with how it felt to be there.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And so you said you spent about a week there?
Spent about a week there, yeah.
And so then what does that look like when you leave? I feel like that must have been just I mean, obviously they were there for a long, long, long time afterwards. What is that experience like when you're like, all right, our time here is done. Now we have to go back to normal life. I have to imagine that was a bizarre thing.
You know, I have no recollection of like a transition back to normal life, because I was in college. So I think I just did my time. And when I went back into school. I don't ever recall like a defining moment where it's like, oh my gosh, this is over. And that's probably because it was so massive that it was never really over. Like it kind of trickled over, even though my work was done, right? I never went back to do anything with on the pile until way after I got on the job. Um, yeah, no, there was no on off switch. It just kind of transitioned from one thing to another. It's no different than any other disaster or run that we're on. Like you're in this world and then you're suddenly back in reality. And I never really thought to think of a dividing line between any emergency and real life.
Interesting.
It all just existed.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then you get on the job. What month do you get on, or how much after 9/11 are you on the job?
So 9/11, obviously, September 11th, 2001, I'm on the job. I swear in July 28th of 2002. So less than a year later.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then you spend 2 years on the engine, and then you get the call to switch to hazmat. What is your knowledge of Hazmat One at that point? What do you think about them? What do you know?
I know nothing of them. Quite literally nothing. I think there was maybe one or two runs that I was on as a firefighter in which hazmat showed up. They were high CO events. Um, and that's really all I knew. And I didn't even know enough to be like, hey, I wonder what these guys are doing. Let me go check them out. Like I was, you know, it happened within my 2 to 3 years in the engine. And at that point in time, you're just so encompassed in learning the job that is in front of you that you don't really see what's happening with other people on a scene. Like you're just trying to figure out your shit so you don't disappoint your boss and your guys, right? So I remember them being on scene. I remember being like, oh, hazmat. I know people have told me that I should at some point look into hazmat because that's always what the conversation would be. They'd oh, you have a degree. As soon as it was a science degree, be like, ah, you should go to Hazmat One, you know. And it's like, so I heard over and over again about Hazmat One. I didn't really know much about it. So when I went, I was kind of like, I know that you don't get transferred to special operations with 3 years on the job, but they were scraping the bottom of the barrel. Like the 9/11 took out 19 guys from the house. So you know they were devastated. They needed anybody that could be even remotely competent, and so I just kind of went.
So with that, I know that house was, I think, lost the most people of any house in the city on 9/11.
Yes.
You're coming there, at that point, 3-ish years after that. What was the vibe of that house? It had to have been still really, really heavy.
It wasn't. It was and it wasn't. So like you take somebody like you know, Bobby, the other co-host of the Hazmat Guys. He went to that house right after 9/11, right? So he's the one that felt that, like, you're replacing guys, like who the hell are you, right? That heaviness, he really felt that. I'm coming in a couple years later. A majority of the people that were working on 9/11 in Hazmat One are gone. Have either retired, they've gone on to the battalion. Most of the people that were there were involved in 9/11, but they weren't part of that company. So the people that they lost were not associated with that house. Totally different feel from the squad guys who were there there for 9/11, knew the guys, lost the guys. The ratio of those guys was different. They were still a little more. There was still much more of a divide between hazmat and squad from a house unity point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that at the time, Hazmat One was a great place to go, do a couple years, and scoot out. So you built up your overtime, you got some skills, and I think there was a tremendous amount of resentment between the two companies where you have one company that's like, no, I'm here because this is my world, and these other people in Hazmat One, or that would be Squad 288, and then Hazmat One, who is like, hey, I'm here to pad my retirement and I'm going to punch out.
Mm-hmm.
Two very different worlds trying to live together.
Yeah.
So that part was the awkward part. The I was looked at as just lower than dirt from the squad guys, and the hazmat guys were pissed off I was there because I was a spot that was taking their overtime. So they were there for the overtime. They didn't want somebody else coming in taking the overtime. So the definitely the first couple of years in that house was not comfortable.
Yeah. So how does that, understanding, and I guess I'll have you maybe even explain for people that aren't familiar, but like understanding how vast the capabilities of Hazmat One are and all the stuff that you have to know to work on that rig. What does the spin up look like when you show up and all of a sudden it's like, it has to be years before you know everything that's going on.
It is. It's about, we always say well, first of all, it takes 2 years just to feel like you're not gonna bring the team down, right? It takes 2 years in the company before you're like, all right, I've got a handle on what's going on. 5 years before you feel comfortable. 10 years before you feel like you could run a scene. That's generally how we look at it. And it's a tremendous spin up. You have to do every single piece of equipment on the rig on Hazmat One. You have to do like a half an hour to 45-minute presentation to the other specialists in Hazmat Company One. And you're graded on that. And if you get signed off, great. Now you move on to the next piece of equipment. If you don't, then you got to go back and you got to do that presentation all over again, some other time. This is what you messed up. This is what you didn't. I would say total, to really consider yourself a specialist in Hazmat One, you're looking at about 1,500 hours worth of training.
Wow. And what's the thought process with those presentations? Is that building instructor skills? Is that the idea that if you know something truly, you can teach it, or
everything? It's everything, right? Because this from being a hazmat technician, the person who knows the least about a hazmat run is quite often the incident commander. The person who knows the most about a hazmat run is often the hazmat technician, who, from a NIMS command structure point of view, for anyone listening that's not in the fire department, is the absolute lowest man on the totem pole. So it's a very awkward thing to have a firefighter running the scene through an incident commander who doesn't actually know anything about what they're doing. And that's not a knock on the chiefs that are out there. Most chiefs are operation based. They don't go on to get that hazmat tech training. So what we do is Hazmat One makes sure that no matter what happens, that the 4 specialists that are working could run any scene that they go on. If there's a covering off, right? We have to be able to operate with a covering officer, operate with a covering hazmat battalion chief, and operate with an incident commander that doesn't know, that doesn't know what they're doing. So when we take and we are such, for lack of better words, douchebags with signing people off, it's because, one, we want to make sure you know the equipment. We want to make sure you know the just the knowledge and the basic concepts. 2, yes, from an instructor point of view, we need to make sure that you know this well enough to be able to teach it to that 5th grade level, because that incident commander is not going to feel comfortable with anything that's going on if you're talking over their head. So it has to be broken down. And that also lays into teaching, where when we teach it to a level that somebody can understand, right? We're teaching the firefighters, so it has to be at that firefighter level, and then we can build on it from there. So And then I need to make sure that, or we need to make sure that their thought process is one of an officer as well as a chief, because firefighters on scene have different thought processes than an officer on scene. An officer on scene has different thought processes than a chief. I need to make sure that my hazmat specialists are thinking as officers and chiefs as well. That way, if there's no officer and there's no chief that, has the ability to make those decisions, the firefighter can be one step ahead of them, already understand what the overarching goal of both an officer and a chief are, and have a answer ready for them before the question is even asked.
Mm-hmm. So you get spun up in the teams here. And at what point in that process do you actually start teaching these subjects? Beyond that presentation on equipment, I suppose.
Well, so when we started in Hazmat One, teaching was kind of like this. There wasn't a lot of teaching opportunities. They were very limited, and they were generally taken up by the more senior guys. So, you had to get signed off. You had to do all these things. Slowly, it sort of shifted because some of us were like, well, wait a second. The best way to learn to do something is to teach it. Because in all honesty, right, like hazmat is a low probability, high risk entity, meaning you don't do the things that you have to do a lot. You do them few and far between. I've done 20 years of WMD training. I have never been on a weapons of mass destruction event. So the best way for me to be proficient with it and to really know the information is to be forced to teach it. So I prefer people to immediately turn around as soon as they're out of tech school and they're in Hazmat One, go back to the training academy for hazmat and start teaching it in some way, shape, or form. Now, does that look like you're getting up there and you're doing, a 7-hour presentation on chemical physical properties and meters? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. But if you can just take let's say you've got one little station and you become proficient at that one little station, then you move on to learning another station. Or you get up and you talk about a subject for 15 to 20 minutes. And then you talk about 2 subjects for 15 to 20 minutes. So for me, it's making sure those guys get down there and teach was always about being a proficient Hazmat One specialist right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. And so now you're teaching, and eventually, and I know a little bit about this origin, but not a ton.
Oh, the podcast origin.
Bobby goes, we should start a podcast.
No. It starts before that.
Okay.
Give me it. So I am not a technologically enhanced human being. This. Yeah,
no,
I'm not.
Yeah,
no, I'm not. I do the basic stuff with computers, and beyond that, much to Bobby's chagrin, I am not technologically proficient. So I had never listened to podcasts. I knew they existed. I mostly knew they existed, not because I listened to Joe Rogan, but because I listened to Opie and Anthony, who had Joe Rogan on and talked about his podcast, and then Anthony did anyway. So I knew about them. I knew what they were, but I never listened to one. Well, when Bobby came over to Hazmat One, he goes, hey, I'm trying to learn as much as possible about this hazmat stuff, which is kind of nonsense because he already was phenomenally educated in hazmat to begin with. But he's always looking to learn. He's always looking to fill that any kind of void of knowledge that may exist. He goes, do you know of any podcasts? I'm like, no, sorry, man. Like, I don't listen to podcasts. Like, I don't, and he goes, okay. And about 3 weeks later, he comes to me and he goes, I can't find a podcast on hazmat. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I don't know of any. I'm sorry. And he goes, do you think people would want to listen to a podcast on hazmat? He's like, because I'm looking for a podcast on hazmat. Do you think other people would? And my answer to him was, who the hell would want to listen to a podcast about hazmat? Right? Because you got to remember, like, I'm not in love with hazmat by any stretch of the imagination, right? Like, I don't live and breathe. I mean, it seems like I do, but this, for me, staying in hazmat, because I had the choice to go back to a regular company. And I did it for a couple of months and then I came back again. It was about being able to make sure that I was putting food on my family's plate, right? Like when everything boils down to it, I loved firefighting. I miss firefighting tremendously. I do feel like I gave up something tremendous to be able to do the hazmat. But when all is said and done, like nobody's hiring a nozzle man, after 20 years once you retire. Like what skills do you have? I break window. Okay, cool. You break window. So I understood that hazmat was a path to being able to do more and be more than just what a normal firefighter would do as side work. So I grew to love it based upon the fact that it was able to provide a better life for my kids than I could have done just being a firefighter.
And so talk to me about that early process of starting up the podcast then. So he says, I can't find one. I want to do it. What do you think about it? And does he have to coerce you into that?
Oh,
what does that
absolutely.
look like?
Absolutely. Because I was like, that was my answer. I'm like, who the hell's going to listen to a podcast on hazmat? I go, besides, what are we going to talk about? Like, it's not like there's endless things to talk about. I said that to him before I understood that I was in a position where I didn't know that I didn't know what I didn't know. Right? I wasn't, I was just starting to understand that there was a vast world out there. But he goes, all right, let's do this. Write out 10 topics. Let's just write out 10 topics. The first 10 topics of the podcast are those 10 topics. So, well, actually, that's not true. I wrote out 10 topics. We did the first 5 topics. And then it was like, okay, people are actually like listening to this. Like, not much, 10 people. Like, what are we talking, right? Like, and so what started to happen was as things happened at work, I would make a podcast about them. Like that was the juice for the content of the show would be things that happened at work. And it took years before I got to those last 5 topics that I had written down.
Interesting.
So that was it. We just started doing it. And I mean, the first couple are horrific, like sitting in my dining room, we're sitting in the bunk room, trying to just experiment with the computers and microphones. We had no idea what we were doing. We were, we're on crappy microphones, and then we're buying soundboards, and we're trying to connect them into laptops, and we just had no clue what we were doing. It was atrocious and awful, but that's kind of where it began. And to be honest with you, the amount that I learned from doing the podcast, because I realized that there's so little that I actually understand about the subjects that I'm doing, that I would turn around and I would do hours worth of research to create a show. And that is where I started realizing that there's so much more out there than just what was in my head. Like what was in my head. And even still now, I realize the more I learn, it's like the more I learn, the less percentage I actually have. Because you realize, okay, I just learned a percentage about this, but holy crap, that just added 99% to the other side of crap that I don't know.
Yeah, that is the problem with learning is you only just learn that you don't know a lot more than you do know.
Yes. Yeah.
So you start doing the podcast, and is there a moment when you guys go, holy crap, we might have something here? Do you remember that?
No.
There has to be some point in time we decide, oh, wow, we should actually do this instead of just this casual thing on the side,
I think it was a slow progression because we watched the numbers slowly go up, right? We were like, oh my God, we got 100 followers. There's 100 people that watched, that listened to this show. And then that 100 became 200. And it was like, more people are downloading. It's like, oh, wow, this is cool. Like we actually, from my point of view, I was looking at it as an instructor, right? Like I'm teaching, I taught 200 people this week. Like that's really cool. It wasn't until we started going away to schools and people were like, wait, Hazmat One. Wait, Mike Monaco, wait, are you one of the Hazmat guys? That's when it started realizing when we're in airports or away and people are coming up going, hey, are you Mike from the Hazmat Guys? Like, do you have a podcast? And that's when I was like, oh wow, like people are actually like listening to this.
And so then at some point you guys start teaching the conference circuit. And I know that that's kind of when things went, crazy.
Yes, that's when they
So
went
what's
crazy.
that like? What was that
Well,
decision like? How did you get involved with that, and how did it grow?
so it was, the purpose of it was only to get people to realize that we even existed. That was the purpose of going to, because we were like, I bet you if we got a few more listeners, we may be able to sell advertising for this. And then like, it's not actually costing us money to run this podcast, because podcasts, they're not cheap. And way back when, there wasn't all of these softwares out there to help you create a podcast. You had to do, we were using Audition, and we were doing things and spending money on equipment and hosting and memory and all these things that I really actually know nothing about. I just know we were spending money on them. And so the idea was like, maybe we could get advertising to cover the cost of the podcast. And it just kind of grew from there. And then as it slowly grew and we were able to cover the cost of the podcast with some advertising, people would come up to us and be like, hey, can you like come to our department and do a class on this? And we were like, yeah, sure, why not? And then, we kind of started moving down that path of training. And when we opened ourselves up to training, a lot of people were interested in having us come and train. And the podcast, the company as a whole shifted to being podcast primary, to having a twin sister of podcast and training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's kind of where we find ourselves now. And there's even more room for expansion as we get into books and the upcoming conference and all this stuff.
Games.
So games. Yeah. The game too.
Yeah.
I love the game. I'm excited for the game to come. We were just talking about the game being shipped over earlier today. But so give me a rough breakdown of what's going on with the Hazmat Guys now, and then a little bit of view into what we hope to see in the future.
Ooh, a rough idea of what's happening now. Well, we currently run a really robust social media, section, doing very well. Appreciate everything you put into it. We do the podcast. We have, it's still the same type of format. We're still turning around and making it education based with some interviews. We create a kind of an area where people can learn from, in hopes that other people jump in on it too, right? Like, one of the goals to this podcast for me was always, let's transmit information faster than any other current media that's out there. Because when we started the podcast, the only real way that you would know about changes in anything was going to a conference and listening to an instructor, or this company, this department had this thing that happened and their lessons learned come out in a conference. We were like, I hope one day the podcast gets to a point where, Joe has a run, things go horrifically wrong, and he gets on the air and talks about what went horrifically wrong, just like guys do when we come back to the firehouse from a job. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, when I was in 233, we would come back and the entire house would sit down and it would be like, okay, what did you do? What could you have done better? This is what I did. This is what I could have done better. This is what I screwed up. This is what I didn't realize. And I was able to learn so much as a firefighter by listening to these seasoned guys talk about how they screwed up the simplest stuff. Right? Like, I'm the OV. I went to the back and, I grabbed this ladder instead of this ladder. I should have realized. I saw that the land went down as I went back, and I grabbed the ladder that was too small to get to what is the second story in the front, but actually from the back, it's 3 stories up. So you like the sense of learning that came from that firehouse kitchen table post-incident analysis. I was really hoping the podcast would turn into that. I was really hoping it could be an archive of just things people had done, lessons that were learned, best practices, things like that. And I've been very disappointed with that, because social media policies have really hindered people from being able to come on air and feeling like they could talk. So yeah, it's not exactly what I want it to be, but It's slowly getting there, and it's still I think it's a great educational tool.
For sure. And then before I let you go, give me one more view to the future. Talk to me a little bit as we're finalizing stuff for Southernmost Hazmat Conference. Give me a little bit of sneak preview to what we expect to have there. What are some of the fun things that we're working on?
I am so insanely excited about the Southernmost Hazmat Conference, and from being at conferences after conferences after conferences, and Bob as well. I mean, Bob does almost 19 conferences a year. So we get to really see the conferences. And one of the things that has really bothered me when I go to the conferences is the fact that the conference is really, it's supported by the vendors. And yet the vendors, I feel like, are kind of treated like redheaded stepchildren, right? Like they're there, they exist, but they're certainly not supported by any stretch of the imagination. So one of the things that I want to do is to create a portion of the conference in which a student can come in, learn new material, and also get to play with the equipment or the services that the vendors offer. That way the vendors are part of the conference for more than just the 15 minutes between classes, and the students get to do hands-on stuff that an instructor like myself, I can't bring tons of equipment for people to do hands-on stuff during a conference, and there's no structure set up in a conference to do it. But now I've got the vendors there, they're there with their equipment, I can pair them with an instructor. A person could come, they can do hands-on work, they could learn, they could have fun. They're not just sitting in a classroom, because there's nothing worse than sitting in a classroom all day. And yeah, that's where I'm hoping this pattern changes conferences in general.
And of course, it's all going to happen in Key West, which is not too bad in the middle of winter.
Right. It's an easy button for us, because even if we can't get enough people to go there as technicians, people are gonna go just because it's a vacation spot. So we're good.
Yeah, it's going to be great. All right, Mikey, I know I kept you longer than I intended to, but I had a great time talking to you, buddy. I love it. Thanks for sharing some stuff. I got to know you a little bit more. I learned out you're a ballet dancer from Texas. That's pretty cool. I love it, buddy. Thanks for chatting to me.
All right, anytime.